all, for everybody who is joining us, we are so appreciative you're here for our Emerging Europe discussion here. And this particular hour is called Let the Media Talk. I am a member of the media. I'm Liz Klayman from the Fox Business Network, and I'm thrilled to be running this specific panel called Emerging Europe, Old Europe, America, and the Rise of Asia. What is next? We have an extraordinarily distinguished panel here to talk about pretty much emerging Europe and the US and how we move toward 2030. So as we talk about all of these issues, whether it's political, economic, business, security, lobbying, disinformation, populistic tendencies, boy, there's so much to tackle. On our panel today, we are honored to welcome a group of brilliant international journalists. James Brooks is editor-in-chief of Ukraine Business News. Ognan Yaniski is editor-at-large of TV24 North Macedonia. We also welcome Nevena Krasteva. She's editor-in-chief of C News. Craig Turp is editor-in-chief of Emerging Europe. And Marek Techman is deputy editor-in-chief of Gazeta Prana. And Wojciech Przybylski is editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insights. I am going to begin right now with the start of this issue. And by the way, we're very open to questions on this as well. But I want to begin with you, Craig, and I'll just simply ask this. What do you believe is pretty much, I guess, the emerging Europe region play and the role that it plays now when you compare it, say, for example, to the legacy powers of old Europe, and how do you see its influence developing and growing globally within the next decade?
Hi, it's Jim Brook here. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
I can't. I'm not on. Am I on video? Do you see Jim Brook?
No, we do not just yet. So while you're figuring that out, let me begin with Craig.
Oh, here I am. Yeah, here I am.
There you are. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. Hi. The question was about Ukraine, correct?
No, not just yet. We're going to start with Craig.
Okay.
That's all right. I'm happy to give way.
Yes, go ahead, Craig.
But no, I mean, coming back to your question, it's an enormous question, and it's not one that can be answered in just a few short sentences. Mm-hmm. I think that where emerging Europe is at the moment is that it's still playing catch up with a number of regions around the world. But at the same time, because of the fact that it began its transition, as we like to call it, a lot more recently than other parts of the world, I also think that there's an issue when it comes to actually going beyond some of the things that have already been done in, Western Europe, in the US, in Asia, for example. One example I always like to use is mobile telephony and internet. It's no secret that, some of the countries in this region have the fastest internet in the world. And the reason for that is because they did not have to switch from legacy telephone lines, which were used because they existed in many of these countries, particularly in Romania, in Bulgaria. There weren't that many telephone lines. So when people wanted the internet, they just went straight from no internet whatsoever to fiber optics because there was nothing in between. So although, we are playing catch up to a certain extent, at the same time, I also think that there's an advantage in the sense that because we don't have a lot of these legacy issues, we can actually leapfrog a lot of the stages that other regions have been through. And I think that's the region's big advantage.
You know what, I find that interesting because it's true that you talk about legacy and things that are sort of solidified from old Europe that don't really have to be what happens in the future. And I guess as we look at the future, many aspects of influence, whether it's economic, military, diplomatically, I want to bring this to Nevena Krasteva. C News has covered Montenegro, Romania, Moldova lately, but where do you see, and whether it's those countries or elsewhere, the biggest opportunities in emerging Europe from a business standpoint?
Yes, we are focused on Southeast Europe, so I would be speaking more about the Balkans and not so much about Hungary and Poland, the other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So, as you know, our region, the Balkans, is very much on the edge, as the Deputy NATO Secretary General said, Mircea Joana said in the previous panel. So, and being on the periphery, it has been very much, as we know, the playground for it has been playing this balancing act between the West on the one side, and then you have be it Russia, or in the past years we have China being very, very strong in this region. So actually, in many ways, the COVID pandemic has accelerated many trends that have been already underway, and actually it has opened up some opportunities. So just again, referring to what Mircea Joana said, one of these opportunities is in shortening the supply chains. Because now in this post-COVID situation, the EU and the US will probably very much be looking for ways to shorten the supply chains. And in this respect, I think that the opportunities that open up for Southeast Europe are very much related to whether it would manage to position itself as a reliable partner, as a place, as not just because of its geographical location, of course, but also geostrategically, as the location, as a place where you could nearshore many businesses. So I think this is one major opportunity.
The region is ripe for opportunity. Go ahead. Do you want to jump in there?
I'm sorry.
Okay. So that's okay. So the region overall is very ripe for opportunity. And yes, you don't really cover Poland, but arguably Poland has had a very solid success recently in forging a stronger relationship with the United States. You know, Poland and the US have recently signed this long-term contract for liquefied natural gas. There's a civilian nuclear energy deal in the works, but you know, perhaps the most interesting is Poland's collaboration with the US to shut out China. You know, you just referenced China when it comes to building out the 5G network. This goes for all of you guys, but Poland and the US signed this 5G joint declaration. President Trump said during President Duda's recent visit that Poland is leading the way in Europe by using trusted providers and provider equipment, supply chains. Do emerging European countries have to submit to sort of an either or strategy, meaning choose between the US and China when it comes to doing business on the global stage? Would you like to take that?
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. Is there a choice between US and China? Well, I don't think there is a
the only choice. You got to do one or the other. Is that what emerging Europe must sort of position itself?
Absolutely. I don't think any country or economy thinks in those terms. That is security dilemma. And on security dilemma, Central Europe is looking towards the US. I mean, China is not bringing any sort of security or legal or framework within you can develop businesses. However, China is bringing opportunities that the Western countries, European or US, have been missing out on for a couple of years before, which are investment opportunities, because this is really a region where there is a lot of growth potential. There is a lot of growth appetite, more importantly, both from the political and business elites. So unless there are countries, there are investors coming from the EU and the US to this region, some of the leaders will be looking to capital flowing from elsewhere, not from the West. And that may bring some dilemmas, security dilemmas, because as we know, capital coming from mafia states like Russia or crony capitalism countries like China come with a burden, a security burden in hand.
Well, if anybody knows about these situations, it's James. James, you cover Ukraine extraordinarily closely here, obviously, but give us a sense of how these countries can make it sort of a cafeteria choice of you pick whatever you want versus being hamstrung? Or is that the reality even for emerging Europe, which is now forging brand new ties with all different countries?
Right, Liz. Thank you, and thank you for having me on. I think we have a sort of 100-day kind of pause here in Ukraine where we're waiting to see what's going to happen in Belarus and what's going to happen with the U.S. election. The Belarus situation is very concerning. Potentially, the Russians could actually move military assets. They already have some in there, but more. And so Ukraine would feel surrounded. And the U.S. election will be very key for Ukraine. I mean, like it or not, Joe Biden has visited Ukraine 5 times. And currently, it's a bit of an anchor around his neck. But the Democrats are kind of out for payback, and there'd be a much tougher position against Russia, let's say, in next year. Right now, there's been very little foreign investment coming into Ukraine, and I just spent a week-long holiday in Turkey, and I was just amazed. I mean, they've increased their GDP per capita 50% in a decade, and Ukraine's flatlined. And you see new investments, you see new enterprises, you see great roads. And, Ukraine is struggling, but I had one reader said, give me, why don't you write more positive news? And I said, give me the top 5 foreign investments in Ukraine this year, and no answer. I mean, first you had the new president kind of screwing up by purging his cabinet in March, and then you had COVID. And so investment visits were canceled. And I'm interesting, our colleague here from Poland, in the 2008 crash, Poland was the only country, I think, in Europe that actually grew. And the sense is that once again, Poland will probably grow in 2020. Ukraine will be down 5 to about 5%. So we're trying to get through this tough period and try to get back on track. But we've got a very difficult geopolitical situation, the US election, and frankly, this rookie president of Ukraine who is not proven to be that competent.
You mentioned COVID, and we would be very remiss if we didn't mention the resurgence of COVID in Southeast Europe. And James, I know you've written about how the Ukraine Health Ministry has expanded its list of red zone coronavirus countries to 65, Albania, Montenegro added. And the borders do shut tonight at midnight, I understand, for a month. So COVID could possibly slow down the global ambitions of emerging markets. But to Ognan Yaneski, and I know the Balkans are dealing with COVID as well, but talk about what the entire region sees for the future of economic relations with the US and then perhaps other countries that look like fertile ground.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz, and thank you for this panel. I really truly believe that we will continue with this kind of cooperation that we had, because the help that came from the European Union to the Balkan countries, especially, I'm talking here about Macedonia, and especially the helps that we had from the United States as well, in economical way, but also in any other way possible, is something that strengthens the communication, strengthens the relations, which in the past, not only few months, but by the influence that Russia and China have on these countries here, it went a little bit down. So it wasn't the same as, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. For example, the Balkan region has these processes of changing governments, which were conservatives into leftists. And now we are seeing that in Serbia as well, and all the protests that are ongoing. And now you see that once again, European Union and the United States are seeing for fact that they must put a bigger influence in these countries if they want them as allies, especially when you see a country like Macedonia, which became the 30th member of NATO, and widening that circle will be part of getting the region with more stability. But also the process of internal reconciliation in the countries is something that should be of the biggest importance, because by everything the United States and the European Union are doing here, is undermined by other forces, and the reconciliation process is in some kind of free fall. And this is something that we should talk about, especially now with the COVID crisis, and especially about everything that is happening. We must take this into consideration if we truly do want to see this region towards 2030 working alongside European Union, as the aspirations are by the Union, and also that cooperation to continue with the United States. Because even though there were signs, clear signs that some things changed, the COVID pandemic just showed us that that is not actually true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that things will start rolling once again, and we will have to control that rolling in which direction will be.
Every country is dealing with this, but as we look specifically at the opportunities here, Craig, give me a sense if we had world leaders in major countries listening in, we certainly hope we do, and we welcome them, but what is the collective case of Eastern Europe, emerging Europe, and why these are incredibly important pieces to the global puzzle?
I think first and foremost is the availability of talent in this region, especially young people. I mean, Wojciech mentioned earlier that, this is a region which is intrinsically entrepreneurial, intrinsically innovative. And I think that needs to be recognized by potential investors. But I would actually turn this around a little bit and say that I think that the region itself, and I'm referring to emerging Europe, needs to do a lot more to promote itself externally. It's not a question of waiting for other countries, other regions to take notice of emerging Europe. Emerging Europe needs to do a lot more to actually promote itself as a destination for investment. And this is probably at the moment its weakest, it's the weakest link in the chain, if you like. Some of the countries in the region are doing a reasonable job, particularly the Baltics, in terms of letting the rest of the world know what they're capable of, what they've got to offer. But unfortunately, a number of the larger countries in the region are not doing particularly well. What's unfortunate is that over the past decade, I suppose, most countries in this region have done very well at promoting themselves as tourist destinations. What they now need to do is to start promoting themselves as investment destinations. That's where the improvement needs to come. So to answer your question, as I say, I don't necessarily think it's a question of, asking global leaders to, take a closer look at emerging Europe. Emerging Europe actually needs to say, come and have a look at us. The onus is on emerging Europe, I think, not on the rest of the world.
What about that, Wojciech? You've been writing about Belarus and its rather impressive technological progress, namely in the realm of digital services, for example. And yet, these internal issues, the population is somewhat divided right now with protests against, these anti-Lukashenko demonstrations, etc. It's hard to juggle the presentation that these countries would like to put forth, their profile to the world versus all that's going on the inside. How do emerging European countries put that aside for a moment and say, we're here and you all are really missing out on an opportunity if you don't come in and invest?
Yeah, Belarus is a very curious case for all reasons that we discussed already. Plus, of course, what is going on, what is happening today. It is the only living remnant of the USSR with official ideology of the USSR in the region. And hopefully it will be gone in a couple of years, the most, if not by these protests. But Belarus is also standalone. It's different from all other countries because of that. Because emerging Europe countries or Central Eastern European countries have chosen to become part of the normative system in which you build trust, for which, I mean, the trust that is essential to do business, to the investment. It also, the countries either are or want to become part of the security arrangement, that is NATO, that is part of the Western alliance, and that comes in a package. This points that Craig just mentioned about identifying the common interest and speaking with one voice, that has been attempted a few times. It will have to be attempted a couple of more times. You know, try and error, try and fail, and then at some point it will work out. Definitely, the countries are still missing on these opportunities. And one other element, though I did write in our preliminary notes on the human capital, the human potential of the region. We also have to be aware that some things push people out of this region. I mean, if we speak of Bulgaria, if we speak of Southeast Europe, currently the trends are, and I believe they might be reversed in the longer run, but currently the trends are that these countries are largely depopulating. They will be, you know, like they will be deserted if some things will not change. I'm speaking of particular cases, not the whole region overall. But yes, the region needs to find itself a common formula. This 3 Cs initiative is one of them. Previously, or kind of a basis for that has been the Visegrad Group cooperation so far. And joining a common platforms of thinking and doing actionable, you know, policy proposals on global stage, on the European stage. That is what is going to move the region forward.
Yeah, it's about moving the needle, Nevena, and then I want to get James's opinion on this. I had this opportunity to interview these 2 video game developers from Bosnia, Herzegovina, and, you know, Amar Zupcevic and Ivan Ramadan. They made this video game that Apple Arcade picked as among its very first to unveil on the Apple Arcade platform. And when I did this long interview with them, they're such joyful and brilliant, you know, game developers, and yet they said there's nothing really happening right now for us as an opportunity. So don't we need to square that? And how do the leaderships of many of these southern emerging European countries get their act together and say, let's just have a great economic strength here that really improves the world for the better overall?
Too many questions in your question. So I'll go back to what Wojciech said and a bit to what Craig said and also to what Ogden said, because it's all intermingled. If we go to the talent pool, or maybe let's start with promoting the region. Actually, there are 3 big elements, I think, to the success of the region, 3 big factors that sort of link all these things: talent pool, promoting the region as an investment destination, and really being successful. So one thing is, like Ogden said, for those parts of Southeast Europe that are still not part of the EU and NATO, that's of course integration into the alliances. But another thing which is actually even more important is improving the climate locally. I mean, one really big thing that has to be done is, of course, strengthening democracy, rule of law, fighting corruption, and all this. If you have all this done, then the rest will follow. And the third really big factor for success is really working across borders. I mean, all the big disadvantages, the big weaknesses of our region of Southeast Europe is that you have these fragmented small markets, and the only way that they can really position themselves is through connectivity, through working together. And well, you mentioned these game developers. Actually, one positive example of working together across borders comes from IT companies in our region. You have this association of big software companies that have been trying to put their efforts mostly in an attempt to retain human capital and to solve this problem with the brain drain. So these are actually, I think, the three big factors: work across borders and improve the climate locally, and also, of course, with the help from the outside world for those countries that are still not part of NATO and EU.
Good guidance. So what about that, James? I mean, where do you see the best opportunities to get emerging Europe sort of out ahead, like if this were a horse race?
Sure. Well, two quick things here in Ukraine is agriculture, and they could double yields if they actually went free. You cannot buy and sell land in this country, farmland. Here, North Korea, Belarus, three other countries you cannot buy. So there's no real farmland market. They've got this mini reform restricted to Ukrainians and may start next year. But they could double yields in agriculture. IT is building on the Soviet STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They're very good, as in Belarus, as in Russia, in IT. Here's a quick factoid. Ukraine is a #1 destination for British companies for computer outsourcing. 17 of the top 100 outsourcing IT companies in the world are in Ukraine. 100 of the Fortune 500 American companies have outsourced IT to Ukraine. Why do you know that? Because there's no upside in saying the back office stuff was done in Lviv or Kharkiv or Odessa or somewhere. So it doesn't help the Ukraine brand. It helps the economy because they're earning much better salaries, earning in dollars, and they're so short of IT people. They're actually, they're recruiting in Belarus as I speak. They are recruiting in Belarus to bring in the Belarusian IT people. So that's a very hot area. And I mean, my son has a startup in Manhattan, and he has his people, 2 of his people in Ukraine, because, he gets better service for about a third the price. Now, that's kind of a hard thing to market. But once again, agriculture, it's boring, but it pays the bills. 43% of Ukraine's output is farm products. And if we go back to COVID, how's Ukraine doing in COVID? Well, people still eat, haven't stopped eating. So that's half of our exports is food, corn, wheat, IT, as I said. If you're a Danish engineering company and want to save money, you'll just outsource it to Ukraine. That's happening. So IT's done well. The Gastarbeiter thing is sort of going sideways because of all the visa restrictions, and metals or go up and down. That's sort of a Chinese play, frankly. But I would say from the country here, it's ag, which is unique. I mean, we have this amazing black soil belt, which is hard to duplicate anywhere else.
We do have a question. So from our audience, and we want your questions. So please feel free to give us these questions. This one's from Anna Ali Begova. Could the panelists elaborate on their vision on how to rebrand emerging Europe into a brain gain instead of a brain drain region? And Ognan, I'll give that one to you, and anybody else can jump in after that, because I'm very interested to know your opinions, considering you all come from different areas. But for TV24 audiences, you speak about this. Go ahead, Ognan.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Thanks, Anna, for the question. It is a topic that we do talk a lot in our country, especially because I do daily TV shows, which are call-in shows indeed. And I talk with the audiences and with the citizens of my country and abroad as well. The ones that already got away, they're already drained away as brains, are also part of my TV show. The thing is that here in this country, we had a lot of foreign investments. We had a lot of factories, a lot of things that we previously didn't work on, but we do now, especially from the manufacturing area. But the thing is that the previous, we had a government for 11 years that was selling our citizens as cheap manpower. So it was something that, okay, yes, we have investments. We have all that we want here in the country as a country of 2 million citizens, but everyone went out, everyone drained away from the country because the salary was not higher than 200 euros per month. And on the other side, you have this IT sector, which has salaries which are more than 2,000 euros per month. But this is statistically very small percentage of the society that works in this sector. And you have this 200 euros and this 2,000 euros working in the same country. But the problem is that these ones with the 200 euros drain away because of low salaries. And these ones with the 2,000 euros drain away because the country doesn't respect them as citizens every day in a daily life. So the thing is that the governments here in this region, not only Macedonia, but there are few examples around the region. All the investors that come within the countries, they should truly discuss these things, that they should pinpoint a salary which cannot be lower than this and this from the national income grossing.
And you know, I had the wonderful opportunity, thanks to Mircea Joana, a couple of years ago to come for the Aspen Institute event in Romania. And in advance, I was talking to the CEO of IMAX. He said, Liz, we have an operation in Romania. I talked to the TiVo people, which is like a DVR system, and they had some technology people there. But who wants in on this discussion? You know, just if you want, just raise your hand, and I can absolutely, yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say that Ogden's point is 100% correct. At Emerging Europe, you know, over the last couple of years, we have made a big point of trying to encourage this region to move away from the idea of being the low-cost region. And that doesn't just go for labor. You know, it also applies to the products which are made here. You know, we have to stop promoting Emerging Europe as a low-cost destination for labor, and also we have to try and promote the things which are made here as being good, not necessarily cheap. You know, Poland is currently, you know, last month they unveiled the prototype of an electric car, and this car is not going to be sold as a cheap electric car. It's going to be sold as a good electric car, and that's what the region as a whole needs to do. It needs to, you know, move away from the idea that, you know, this is the low-cost region, because that only leads one way. You know, it's a race to the bottom, and there will always be somewhere cheaper. There will always be something cheaper. You know, great things are happening in this region, and it's up to the region to say, look, you know, we're doing good things, and these things are of a high quality, and they are worth paying for.
Wojciech, I have a question here from a guest, Irina Keshelashvili. And Irina's asking, what are the guests' views on the destabilizing impact of the increasing propaganda from Russia? That, of course, is clearly at play in the case of Belarus, but, you know, Poland's dealt with this stuff as well.
If I'm, you know, I think in Poland, whatever you see of what Russia is doing in Poland, it is doing much less. The definition of being Pole is being anti-Russian in its, you know, for centuries. It's not that we're so different. Maybe that's, we are so close to Russians culturally. That's why we want to be different. And so it's not, we don't have that much propaganda, Russian propaganda in Poland. There are other issues. We want to be actually friends. We want to do business with Russians, but there are obstacles to that, of course, because of the obvious reasons. One small point, what I wanted to touch upon is, you know, Central Europe is very much, if you compare to the United States, could benefit from the strategies of Iowa State. Agriculture production, like James Brooke said, but at the same time, outflow of young people, human capital, with excellent education in the state, led the state authorities to strategize differently. They now pull a lot of students from abroad. And actually, this is what Central Europe is doing, at least in Poland, you can see, but also in other countries of the Visegrad group, at least, lots of students coming to the region from elsewhere, from global destinations. And at the same time, the region might be promoting good life as it is today. I mean, as it is here with excellent cuisine and excellent drinks and drinking culture also. Not to promote anything, I'll stop here at this point, but a good life. And then people with capital at a certain point in their life might want to return. This is what Iowa has been deliberately playing on. And I think Central Europe is not aware of the potential it can learn from such a strategy here.
Liz, I can't hear you, but can I talk? Yeah, Liz, thanks. Yeah, just quick to follow up on Wojciech's point. The average Ukrainian 19-year-old thinks Krakow and not Petersburg. Petersburg is in the back door. They think Poland. They think that's cool. In terms of the drain, Ukraine really suffers from a brawn drain, not a brain drain. And we have about 1 million of our citizens in Poland, largely in manual labor, which is too bad, but they're sending, it's the second largest source of foreign exchange earnings for the country. $1 billion a month is coming in largely from Poland to Ukraine. Keeping the brains here, as I've said, we're recruiting brains, and the tax rate is 5%, 5% annual tax rate. This is like Steve Forbes land for IT workers. So, you go to move to Krakow and all of a sudden you're probably paying 30% taxes and you're paying €5 for a cup of coffee, whatever. And here you've got the babushka and you may have an apartment. So it's a much better deal for an IT person to stay here. Very quickly, on how Eastern Europe could label itself. I mean, I think one of the great strengths of Eastern Europe inside the EU is that it is a highest growth, lowest unemployment area in the EU. Okay, that's kind of a label that people kind of get their heads around. And finally, Ogden, and I don't mean to diss you in any respect, but Macedonia, Montenegro, you've gone through that your entire life. You're tired of hearing about Chornogoria, Montenegro. Everyone, at least here and unfortunately in Russia, go to Montenegro on vacation. So that builds up a huge familiarity. It builds up the real estate market. It builds up investment. It builds up, yacht clubs and marinas. And I know that's not quite Macedonia's forte, but tourism, and I think in the case of Croatia, we could argue that tourism breeds familiarity and a love for a place. And 1 out of 1,000 tourists decides to buy a second home and maybe move their office there. So these places need to be known because, Croatia is kind of small. Ukraine is very much off the beaten path. I've been here for 5 years. I invite people to come to visit and they never do.
James,
my sister does.
I'm actually half Ukrainian.
Good, good.
Novo-Russian. It was Odessa many years ago.
Odessa, sure.
They chased my people away.
Yeah. Come on over. I'll invite you over and you won't come.
Listen, I would actually love to, but as we look at the
and the borders will open.
Yeah, we're just a few minutes left, but Craig, you make an excellent point about the fact that you don't want to be promoted as, hey, cheaper over here. My sister is a violinist. She's a studio musician in Hollywood, and she lost all the business because it was Prague Philharmonic are just as good, yet a lot cheaper. It should be Prague Philharmonic is unbelievable, easier to work with in terms of whatever it may be, but not cheaper. You don't want to price yourself out by being as expensive, but I agree with you on that point. Marek, give me your thoughts as we finish up on the picture as we look forward. What is next for emerging Europe?
Well, the one thing we didn't really mention during this discussion is a change that is occurring in the European Union. And as long as we, look at emerging Europe as a very potential region, it is connected to the Western European economy. We are part of the German industrial powerhouse. All those countries, especially Visegrad 4, meaning Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, are part of the supply chain of the German export industry. And that way we are connected as well with the global economy. And we are benefiting from being part of these industrial chain. But what I want to point out is that after Brexit, there is a huge change occurring in the European Union. The last European Union summit was long, but it ended up with the resolution. It ended up with the idea of pumping 750 billion euros into European economy, into infrastructure projects. And it showed that the French-German cooperation is going to push European Union in one direction. It's not going to be that European Union that we are used to, that was struggling with making a decision. It's going to be much more continental, much more coherent, and much more willing to spend money. Germans realize that if they want to keep Eurozone together, and they are highly benefiting from being in Eurozone because it makes them competitive. I just imagine Germany with the Deutsche Mark. They would be like Japan, totally uncompetitive. I mean, the Germans understand that they need to spend money as well to keep it together. And I believe that we will have the European Union ready to spend money. And it means that the emerging Europe needs to redefine its relation with the European Union, trying to bring in more of the higher added value investment. And this is what we were all talking about. We need to avoid race to the bottom, which is disastrous for many countries. And we need to understand that the high quality human capital that we are all having over here could be very beneficial for the economy of the future. But then we need a good leadership. And James, you were making a point about the promise that the Ukrainian president gave to the people, and he didn't deliver. And we are lacking a quality leadership that is able to look over the next few months, but as well over the borders, and understand that only if we just, like cross the mental border of looking at our countries only, like by their national border, then we can progress.
Nevena, I want you to get the last word here. And as we do, we have to keep in mind exactly what you all have pointed out, that there is unbelievable opportunity here, but it's got to rise up so that people can see that beyond whether it's the COVID borders closing, Brexit, all of the other issues that have happened with the European Union, not to mention all that we look forward to with this trouble with Russia and who knows what else, the demonstrations that we have. So if you can kind of crystallize on a positive note how it looks for emerging Europe, that would be a wonderful way to finish up our amazingly wonderful discussion.
Okay, I'll try to, but I'll have to start from a negative note first. I'm sorry. So going back to what Craig said and Ogden said about salaries and about this need to move up from a cheap destination to up the value chain. Actually, it won't happen with just asking foreign investors to promise that they want to go beyond a certain salary. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is by making the local business competitive. And for that to happen, you have to have a certain local environment, and you have to have a certain global environment. And like I said, you have to also make the best of the situation, and you have to work across borders. So one thing is improve the climate, the environment locally. The other is try to find ways to work with your neighbors, to put behind all the mistrust or whatever historical heritage you have that hinders good relations, and embrace the EU, the Western value, democracy. That's it.
Listen, that's the big opportunity. Unfortunately for me, you guys can talk for as long as you want. I have my show because I am 5-6 hours behind you on Fox Business. I extend an invitation. Everyone come to visit me in New York at Fox Business. I'm happy to host all of you. Our thanks to our panelists and Emerging Europe founding partner, Andrew Roble, along with all of Emerging Europe's partners from GPW, Warsaw Stock Exchange, Obra to Aspen Institute, Romania, Macedonia 2025. I can't name them all, but ACC, American Chamber of Kosovo's Frontier Europe. We are so grateful. And I hope that this is a discussion that has a very long tail, and that we continue to fight for emerging Europe in the most positive, capitalistic, energetic way, where the citizens can really rise and thrive. Thank you.